Hey guys, John from Gaddy's Garage. Today we're going to finish welding up our one-off wheel. Hey guys, welcome back. Monday in the shop. We're back on the 24-hour chopper build prep. And the plan today is to get the wheel all welded up, the rear wheel we've been working on. So we got to get the hub welded together, get the hub welded to the center, and get the center welded to the rim hoop. So hopefully before we leave today, we'll have a complete wheel, minus the rear brake rotor mounting system, which will also have to get welded to the wheel eventually, but I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do that yet. So that'll come after we get the wheel completed. Anyway, that's it. We're going to get to work. Try and get this thing knocked out. So we're at the welding table. First thing we need to do is get our hub welded up. We made this hub in a previous video, so check that out if you haven't seen it. Just using a little bit of rubbing alcohol, clean our TIG wire off, and then we're gonna get started welding it. It's the first time me using the welding positioner, so it went a little bit herky-jerky to get started. It's a little tricky using the TIG pedal and using my other foot to turn the positioner on. There is a way to wire this positioner into the welder, so I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit more. But overall, real happy with how it worked out. Definitely made this job easier and got us some cleaner looking welds than we would have got without it. So once we got the face welded there, I'm going to go ahead and flip it around, weld the inside of the hub. We are going to reface the face, I guess you'd call it, in the lathe, smooth that weld off, so the inside weld will just be left alone. Nice strong weld. Probably would be fine to just weld that and have left the face unwelded, but figured what's the difference? We're here welding everything, may as well weld both sides. So now that we got our hub welded, just clearing off our table so we have a nice flat spot to work. And we need to get our wheel center cleaned up. It was plasma cut in one of our previous videos, but there was still mill scale on the plate, so tried to DA sand it off, but it was just taking way too long. So switched over to a flap disc, used a little bit of a worn out flap disc. I didn't want to really remove any metal or gouge it, so yeah, I would have used, like, say, a 120 flap disc had I had one, but I didn't, so I just used a worn-out disc that was laying on the table to get everything all cleaned up, and I did add a little bit of a slight bevel on the outside edges for the weld to fill in. Once we did that, it was time to start setting up our center offset. So based on a stock wheel for the bike we're going to be running, I know that we wanted the face of the mounting sprocket flange to the center of the rim to be 4.5 inches. So keeping that in mind, we took our 1, 2, 3 blocks, added a piece of 1/4 inch steel on the top of each one of those for 1 1/4 inch offset, which is just how everything kind of calculated out. Then you can see here I'm using the speed square, just marking it with a black Sharpie on both sides so I can quickly check all my sides, make sure everything's even and square around the part, checking at random intervals, side to side, front to back, just so everything is nice and square and even for tacking it up. So once we made sure our piece was flat and square to the table, Went ahead and double checked our offset measurement for our sprocket flange, and we're going to be coming into tack weld. So you'll see here I'm going to shoot a couple of tacks on, I guess what you would call the sprocket side of the wheel. Once we get those done, we'll flip it over, do a couple tacks on the brake side of the wheel. And I just did that in order to try to keep warpage down to a minimum, pulling, all that kind of stuff. And all along the way, you see us checking with the speed square just to confirm that we've got everything where we want it. Once we had it tacked into place where we wanted, threw it back in the welding positioner for a quick spin, make sure it's spinning true, and then it's time to get it all welded up. Again, using the welding positioner, giving us our best chance of a nice, even, clean, symmetrical weld all the way around. Again, still dialing the positioner in and working all the bugs out of that of operating your TIG pedal and the positioner pedal, but overall I was real happy with the results of it and would definitely recommend one of these positioners to anyone interested in having them for doing this type of work. I know they're generally reserved for production application, but for these type of one-off parts I found it to be very handy. So we've got one side done, flipped it around. This was a little bit tricky. The sprocket flange was kind of in the way, so I tried to use it as a hand rest and worked out okay. After the welding was finished, popped it out, laid it back on the table, did a little bit of checking, and it had cupped a little bit during our welding. So over to the hydraulic press where we just slightly pressed it and spun and pressed it and spun. Of course, I forgot to video this, so I did snap a picture of it in the press, but doing that was the perfect solution. Got the metal back nice and flat, just how we wanted. And we're back on the table and working on locating our rim hoop correctly centered to our wheel center. Again, we got it sitting on some 1, 2, 3 blocks. This time I started out with 1, 2, 3 blocks with the 1/4-inch spacer that we used previously. That didn't work. It was too low. Flipped the 1, 2, 3 blocks to the 2-inch side. That was too high. So went over to our scrap bin, dug up some square bar. Started out with some 3/4-inch square bar, which I initially thought was going to work okay. So we proceeded to clean the inside of the rim hoop. It was also covered in mill scale. So use this little drum sander. It's a 120 grit. It's kind of like a combination Scotch-Brite flap wheel. It's mostly Scotch-Brite pad with a little bit of like emery paper in between some sections of the Scotch-Brite pad. So worked out pretty well to clean up all the mill scale in the inside of the hoop. With that being all cleaned up, we went ahead and laid it back out with our 3/4-inch square, which I initially thought was going to be what we wanted, but after laying it down a second time with it all cleaned up and really looking it over, I decided that was just still a touch too high, so went and dug up some 5/8 square bar, dropping us down another 1/16 of an inch, which just gave us the perfect location that we wanted. So you can see we're double, triple, quadruple checking our measurements, and we just didn't like it. So here comes our 5/8 square bar. I'm going to ditch the 3/4. 5/8 goes in. We'll lay it back in and check our measurements once again. It's a lot easier to check your measurements on this stuff multiple times than trying to cut it apart. Cutting something like this apart to move it would not have been a fun thing to have to do. Probably would have gouged up your rim hoop or screwed up your wheel center or whatever. So I would definitely advise against welding anything until you're really ready, because again, cutting it apart is not going to be fun. So now that we've got everything cut, or not cut, but measured how we want, I'm going to start tacking it in. The main structure of the wheel center is basically like a pizza cut, you know, a square or an X, and then a turn it 45 degrees and another X. So my plan is to tack all of those 8 main portions in, 4 on one side and then the opposite 4 on the other side, again to prevent pulling and distortion, one at a time, you know, flipping the wheel around as we go. Once we had our 8 points tacked, I went ahead and stood the wheel up vertically and installed it in this little, I guess it's a wheel cleaning roller. I picked it up at Harbor Freight. That just allowed me to keep the wheel kind of located and spin it without it wanting to roll all over the table. Just was really a handy piece to use in doing this type of welding. So once everything was welded, we went ahead and popped it back in the positioner, gave it a spin just to look at run out or potential run out, potential warpage, and happy to say this thing really came out top notch. All right guys, that's gonna do it. We're done for the day. I am beyond excited how this wheel came out. It's the first time ever doing this. A little bit nervous on how it was gonna true up. But man, so pumped. Can't wait to get this perimeter brake rotor installed and get our 21-inch spool wheel also done to match this. But man, whew, good day in the shop. So don't ever be scared to do something. If you're not sure, get out there and try it. It's kind of what we're doing here, you know, we're always trying to push the limits. Yes, I've built hundreds of bikes and made tons of parts, but this wheel, first time ever done. So challenge yourself and build something cool. And we hope to see you next time at Gaddy's Garage.